All right, hello everybody, and welcome to the Midweek Market Watch, coming every Wednesday from the Poke9 TCG channel. This week we're going to go over some movers and shakers in the market and talk about some different trends that we're starting to see. The downward trend is definitely stopping overall, but there's a lot of interesting movement within the market. All right, so for the overall state of the market today, what I really wanted to look at was this Mega Charizard X, the Magikarp Illustration Rare from Paldea Evolved, and the Bubble Mew EX from Paldean Fates. Now, why are we looking at these cards? They have been moderately stable over the last few weeks, and the Mega Charizard X is obviously the big current chase card from Phantasmal Flames. Now, it has been fighting this $600 barrier since about November 26th, and it's been flirting right along that line with $600. Is that going to be the stabilization point for this Mega Charizard? That is something that we want to watch for in the market. I know personally this is a card that I think I would be very comfortable with at around $500, and it is something that is going to continue to be in demand. It is arguably the best artwork of the most popular Pokemon in the Pokemon TCG. I know Pikachu is probably the most popular Pokemon, but everyone collects their Charizards, and this is just such an iconic artwork. With that being said, I do think this $600 price barrier might be the hold point, but there is definitely some more downward trends that could be popping up. The Magikarp from Paldea Evolved is again on a downward trend, but if we look very closely towards the end here, it does seem to be having a slight uptick as it fights that $250 barrier. Now, this is the most iconic illustration rare from the Scarlet and Violet era, so it is very interesting to watch this card because as these cards move, the market moves. So if the Magikarp starts to stabilize, we might see a stabilization in the greater market. And if we look back in March, this card was about 260. It fell down to about 190, and now it's flirting with the 250 mark, which I think might be a very solid stabilization point. We might be seeing the end of the markets going up and down like crazy and starting to see these bigger cards stabilize at appropriate price points for a little while, and that's something to keep in mind with this Magikarp as we look forward. Finally, the big one, the Bubble Mew, the most iconic card from the Scarlet and Violet era. Whether you're a fan of this card or not, there's no denying that this card is something that drives the market and is something that drives the hype. Right now, it is continuing to decline, approaching that $500 barrier. And as we mentioned, these barriers are important points. People like spending round numbers on their cards. No one is going and saying, you know what, I want to spend on a Bubble Mew, $517. People are saying, I want to spend $500 or $550 or $600. So as it continues to decline, we look back in February, it was around $400 and had fallen all the way below $300. I would be shocked if this ends up anywhere near $300, but the next test for this card is that $500 barrier. Will it decline below that level? That would be a very bad sign for the market. But if it starts to stabilize right around that $500 mark, that is something that for the market I think is a very, very healthy sign moving forward. All right, so something I want to talk about is the trend in the market of certain cards actually rising as people are panicking and saying, oh, the market is going down, down, down. And a lot of these cards are cards that I find very popular at tables, you know, those cards that are between $20 and $100 that are kind of where the market lives, where a lot of people are picking up their cards at card shows. So the first one was Mega Absol EX, which it's a very subtle increase, but it was down at about $75 on November 28th, has increased up to over $80 and is right now sitting at about $81, $88 or $82. This is one of the important things because Mega Evolutions is now starting to get a little bit of out of rotation, not the primary set anymore. And it's interesting to see what the bigger cards from that set are doing. Sure, some of them are still going down, but the fact that the Mega Absol is starting to have at least a slight tick up, you know, $10 or $5 over the course of a week is nothing to sneeze at. That is something that we want to keep an eye on as we move through the market. And this is a card that I like that is iconic in the ZA video games. That Absol fight is extremely important. So that is something that you want to be keeping an eye on as maybe younger collectors are starting to look at these cards. Next, we have the Team Rocket's Moltres. Team Rocket's Moltres is something that obviously has tanked recently from its highs of about $180, $160 because of the reprint in the UPC. However, that UPC is now out and available, and I think people are starting to realize, it's not that bad right now, and if the UPC is going to cost me $200, there's really no downside to just picking up the pack Team Rocket's Moltres for $100, right? Or in this case, it's starting to tick up closer to $125. That is definitely, I think, a result of the UPC coming out, and I still think that UPC is a great deal, but it is an interesting thing to see if the stamped version is worth more or less than the pack version right now. But that is definitely one to keep an eye on, and if it's something you've been waiting for, now might be the time, or soon in the next couple of weeks. Then a pair of cards, we have Misty's Lapras. Again, just a small tick up, but again, something we want to be keeping an eye on. $23 up to about $27. Same thing for a Misty Psyduck. It was down at about $47, is back up above that $50 threshold. Again, thresholds are extremely important when you are looking at Pokemon cards, and thresholds could be anything. For this Misty's Lapras, it's probably about that $25 mark. Maybe that's where it settles. But these cards had a big boom and kind of came back down, but now they're very popular. Misty's an extremely popular character. The Pokemon are extremely popular. So they are, ticking back up. Definitely some to keep an eye on, some that you might want to pick up. Next, we have one of my favorite illustrations rares, the Tepig from White Flare. This card is starting to see a rise. Again, these newer sets, White Flare, Black Bolt, I think those are huge sets with a lot of illustration rares that people want that are hard to come by individually because there are just so many illustration rares in those sets. So Tepig, we see, was down at about $17 all the way up to $21 now. So fighting that $20 barrier, and it seems to be winning and going above. Now, a card with a little bit of hype around it because there is a new special illustration rare coming out, Enzark EX, right, was down at about $55 and had really fought to stay below that $60 barrier for a while. Now just a slight tick up, but is approaching that $65 mark. This is a really cool card, a really iconic character, and a really popular Pokemon. So with the hype of the new one coming out, it's relatively subtle hype, but I think that that's what's starting to make people pick this up, is, hey, let me grab this before the new one comes out. And the last thing I want to talk about risers is some of these cards in Pokemon 151. Blastoise EX, again, a little rise here, was getting down close below the $75 mark and is now fighting back up to that $80 price point. This is a card that has lived in that $80 to $100 range for a long time, and now that it's starting to fight that barrier, people are saying, nope, this is one of the best cards and one of the best sets, and we're starting to pick it up. Same thing for a lot of the starters. We have the Charmander here. Again, a little tick up, fighting that $50 price point. Has really stayed steady in that $50 to $55 range, and I don't see any reason that will change anytime soon. Bulbasaur, you see a pretty solid swing up here at the very end of this graph, was down all the way to $35. Which is just so cheap for this card, has already bounced back to above the $40 price point. So again, those barriers is a $40 price point where this card is going to stick for a little while. It seems to be, because even as you go around this big spike, the average is right around that $40 price point. Next, we have Squirtle. Squirtle is the same thing. You see it got down and actually flattened out around $45 and is now on its way back up towards the $50 mark. Is it a $50 card? That's what we're going to find out. But again, a great artwork from an iconic set, not one I would bet against moving forward. Same thing with Charmeleon. Down at about $32, fighting back up above that $35 mark to about $37. Very similar to all of these cards, just iconic artwork, iconic cards, iconic set. And a set that is going to go out of print eventually here. It's been printed a lot, and it's one of those popular sets that people are just going to continue to open. Now, Ivysaur, if you see, for the past year, has really been up and down, but flirting with that $30 point. Was down at about $28 and is up to $33. Pikachu from 151 got all the way up to $52, but if you look at its life cycle, was right around $30, kind of went down below $25, and is now fighting to get above that $40 barrier. Now, really, this Pikachu has lived in that $30 to $40 range for a large portion of its life cycle, and that seems to be an appropriate spot for it. But it's still fighting to go up here. So this is one that I'm not sure is going to continue to stick at that price, but it's interesting to see these 151 cards starting to rebound a little bit from the recent dip. 151's an amazing set, and it's just got so many iconic Gen 1 Pokemon, of course, and that's something to indicate a little bit of health or, danger in the market. So those cards increasing really is a positive sign to me. Okay, so now we're looking on to some cards that have been falling recently, starting with the Charizard EX from Scarlet and Violet 151. This is an interesting one because we've looked at a couple of 151 cards that have been gaining in the last week or two, and this is one that is definitely on the downward trend. It's stabilizing a little bit more, but it was up around the 260 mark a month ago and has since fallen all the way down below $240. The PSAs are also really struggling to maintain, but are at least a little bit more stable. The 9 is right around $260, whereas the PSA 10 is falling below the $1,000 mark, which is a significant thing for the Charizard from 151. It's interesting to see this. We're in the middle of a Charizard set. 151 cards in general have been pretty stable, going up and down, but pretty stable, and a lot of them are rising. So this is an interesting one to keep an eye on moving forward. Is it a card I still believe in? Absolutely. It's the most iconic card from the most iconic set of the last 2 years, and it's something that has brought a lot of people back into the game, including myself. So I'm a believer in this card long term, but short term, do we see an all-time low in its future? It is possible. Next, we have Venusaur EX, also from 151. You see that it is trending downwards. It was on a high of around $90 back in October and has since fallen back into the mid-70s range, in the $75 to $77 range. The card itself is still as popular as ever. 151 as popular as ever, and still way up from its July highs. So this is one that, as the cards around it, and even in the price range around it, like the Blastoise, are potentially gaining, this one is falling just a little bit. So if this is one you need for your collection, I do think this might be a good time to start to pick up that Venusaur EX. Now we move to just a few newer cards that I find interesting. It is not surprising at all that these cards are falling, but the Meowth from Phantasmal Flames, which is easily the best illustration rare, not special illustration rare, but normal illustration rare from the set, started around $60 back in November and has fallen all the way down in the past month to the $20 mark. Now, this is an interesting barrier for this card to keep an eye on. As a top illustration rare, it could certainly settle around this price range. And the Meowth itself is a card I believe in long term, but that does not mean the next month or two are going to be good for this card. This is one to keep an eye on, and as it continues to fall, I would be shocked if this card fell below $10. And it is one that I fully believe will maintain around this price level long term, but it is something that is interesting to watch as we see how Phantasmal Flames develops. It can certainly fall down and settle at a slightly lower price before rising, so it is something to keep in mind. But if you can find some good deals on this Meowth, we're starting to get to that point where I really do think it might be a good card to add to your collection. Couple others from Mega Evolution, the Bulbasaur and Ivysaur combination. Both have fallen to a similar range of around $17 or $18. The Bulbasaur has actually fallen to $16. Now, this is the pack version. The box topper version with the stamp is a little bit higher, closer to $18. But these are both iconic artworks of Generation 1 Pokemon, and it is something that I fully expect to continue to rise as time goes on. It is not something that I fully expect to fall much further than this. Cards like the Ens Reshiram are flirting with that $15 mark up and down, and the Bulbasaur is, at least for Generation 1, something that is very, very popular. People are consistently asking for this card, consistently looking for this card, so it's not one that I expect to have a lack of demand moving forward. And the Ivysaur goes right along with that and is a little bit harder to get at the moment because it only comes from the pack. So these are two cards that, again, if you're looking for them, might be a good time now to pick them up, and is something that I am certainly looking at with interest as a longer-term play, because I cannot see these cards falling below $10. So in the next few weeks, we'll see if they continue to fall, and that might be the best time to pick them up. But again, if you want them for your PC, I think this is a great time. All right, so next we have a couple cards that I am looking at for small pickups in the next couple of weeks. This Delibird here has managed to start to climb a little bit above the $2 mark. It was sitting below $2 back in November and is already starting to climb over the $2.40 mark. I'm not saying this card's going to be worth $100 one day, but is definitely a cute card, definitely winter themed as we get into the winter months. Could be one to keep an eye on, just kind of potentially rising to that $5 mark. An additional one is Houndstone. Just in general, for new cards, I always look for cards with a few things that are on the smaller end. Kind of a ghostly theme, a purple theme. These are very popular things that I see at card shows. And as you see, this card was up in October around the $4 mark and has been steadily falling. And is starting to stabilize right around the $2.50 mark. Again, not a card I expect to be a lot of money one day, but could I see this rising to $5 in the future? Yes. So if this is one you want, I would highly recommend picking it up. This is a very popular one for people's picks, is the Inteleon IR from Mega Evolutions. You can tell that this one is just fighting to stay above that $2.50 mark. So for a really kind of iconic Pokemon with really good artwork, I fully expect this to be a $5 to $10 card. It might take a year or two, but it is something that I will be looking to pick up and hold for any copies I can find in that $2 to $3 range. Next, we have Zacian from Phantasmal Flames. Zacian, one of the newer legendaries in the game and a popular legendary. The sword generally has been more popular than the shield in Zamazenta, and you're starting to see the fall. It was hanging out in the $5 range for a while, and it's starting to head down below the $5 range. And I fully expect this to continue to fall with Phantasmal Flames, but once it gets down to that $3 or so mark, I think that this is one that you should definitely look to pick up as it continues to fall. Something that I fully expect to be a $10 card in the future, as legendaries usually hold a premium. The Dewgong from Phantasmal Flames, very similar. It is a beautiful artwork of an original 151 Pokemon. It's continuing to fall and fall and fall and is starting to flirt with that $5 mark. I find it hard to believe that this card will ever stay below $5 for a significant period of time, and I fully expect to be similar to different 151 cards. There's the Paldean Tauros, there is Nidoking, there are a few others that always have flirted on the lower range, but are consistently in the $8 to $10 range. That is where I feel this Dewgong will be in a year or two. So this is one that I'm looking to pick up copies of on the cheap and probably hold for the future. And last but not least, one of my personal favorite little cards, one that I can never keep in stock, is Lily's Ribombee. It is a beautiful artwork, an extremely popular trainer with Lily, and it is just one that has consistently been flirting with that $5 mark, as we see all the way back to May of this year. It's been in that $7 to $5 range. It's kind of ridden a bunch of waves, and now you see it towards a low of near $5. This is one that I fully expect to kind of start to climb at some point. I don't know where that point is, but at $5, that is an excellent price point to be picking up this card and holding it for the future. Just a beautiful artwork. I cannot see this card falling below $5. It's fought that barrier for a year, and I just see it going up moving forward. Again, it might not be the fastest climb, but that is definitely my pick for the small card to be looking out for as you go into these card shows this week.